Okay, so this is the first lab, and in this lab we're going to investigate some Linux services. So I'm running a vSphere infrastructure here, so I'll just log in. And then what we're going to do is we're going to select a Linux image and also a Windows image. So you can do this with the standalone VMs. It's just more convenient with inside the vCenter infrastructure. Okay, so we'll select our VMs. So in this case you should find the VMs in here. So we'll select two VMs, and in this case we'll select the Windows VM. It's running a little bit slow because we're running it actually on a busy server, and also it's a remote desktop, so it's just looking a little bit slow just now. This one is already powered up, so we're okay with this one. So we'll just power this one up. Okay, so let's log in. Let's get the password right. Okay, that's us in. So next what we'll do is that we'll run the Windows 2003 server. It should go onto the same network. Okay, so this one's already logged in. So the first thing we normally do is we make sure that we know what our IP addresses are. So the Windows machine is at 0.3, and we'll have a look to see where the Ubuntu machine is. So this is with ifconfig. And it is at 10.200.0.7 is our Linux machine. Okay, so we're going to try and discover all the services that are running on our Linux machine and to see that it's what it's running. Okay, so anytime we can have a look at the netstat-a, the netstat program gives us our services that are actually running. So netstat -LTU, L for listening ports, T for TCP ports, and U for UDP will tell us which ports that we're running there. So in this case we're running FTP, an FTP server, we're running Telnet, SMTP, an email server, LDAP, we're running web for TCP services, and boot PC for our ARP services. Okay, so we can also look at any associated programs, processes with these services, with the internet services, by running sudo nstat antp. We can see all the processes. There's the inetd, that's the internet daemon, and so on. What we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the web service. So in this case we go into var and www, and there's only one file there, it's called index.html. We can have a look at that one. Okay, very simple. So that's the home page for the web service on the machine. So the first thing we'll do is we'll access the remote service through a web browser from Windows. Okay, so here we go. And our address is 10.200.0.7. Okay, so that's what. So that means that our web server is actually running okay. Next thing we'll do is that we'll run a telnet client to see if we can talk to the service. So sometimes the service isn't actually working, so we might use telnet to be able to access it, and then we define the port as port 80 that we have here. Okay, we don't see anything because it's waiting for us to connect. So if we say get/index.html, there we go. Okay, so in this way we can actually access the service using the telnet so that we can actually debug it. So the next thing we'll do is we'll have a look at this. And what we want to do is to be able to create our own page so that we can actually access it. Okay, so I'm going to use VI. And we'll just call it my home page.html. Let's give an h1 tag. Okay, so unfortunately, we're not able to write to it, and so I needed to be the super user. Okay, so let's try again. bi my page. There we go. Okay, so we've got a page there. So it's called my page. In Linux, the case is it's important. So when we go back over here and we open our web browser up, and then we access it again. We need to remember to put the capital P. Okay, so that shows how we can create some pages on our website and how we can access them. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the logs. And the logs are kept in var log and Apache 2. Okay, so you can see there's a whole lot of logs in there. Some of them have been archived. We have a look at the date on them. We can see when they were last written to. So you can see here's a new one, the access.log. So we'll have a look at this one. And we can see here, this was the page I accessed before. And here is the home page that I accessed. And then there was the page I've just accessed. So we can see with inside here there is a whole lot of information about the browser itself, and here is the IP address of the machine which actually accessed the Linux machine. Okay, so the log itself can contain a whole lot of information. Okay, so the next service that we'll have a look at is the telnet service. So we'll run this again. This time we'll access port 23. It will by default connect. It just takes a little minute to connect. Let's see if we've done that correct. Let's try again. So telnet 0.7. There we go. Okay, so we logged in as Napier. And there we are. Okay, so you can see there's the default home folder, and we're in home and Napier. Okay, so that allows us to telnet into the machine. So over here we should be able to go to home, Napier, and there we go. So that's the same as we see on the telnet side. Okay, so the telnet service is working perfectly. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to access the FTP service. So we could do this through a client, but we'll just try and do it through the web browser. Okay, so 110.200.0.7. And this time we're using the FTP protocol. And it's just discovering the folders. It's an old version of Internet Explorer, so it's a little bit slow. Okay, so as before, Napier, there. There we go. Okay, so that gives us our FTP listing. And what we're going to do is we're going to do the exact same, but this time we're going to use the FTP commands. Again, sometimes we have to do this. Use telnet. Okay, so we're connecting to port 21. Then we type the command to user, Napier, password, Napier123, There we go. So we're in. Okay, so one of the commands there is pwd, and that shows us the present working directory. We can do type I, which is ASCII, and another one is passive. Most connections that we make are passive FTP, so often we have to go into this mode. Oops. What happens next is that we can now go into list, and actually you won't see anything, and the reason for that is that it creates an FTP port which we should connect to be able to get the listing in this case, or the files. This is the way that FTP works. The port 21 is used for the commands, and we create a port actively against the server. And the way that we calculate it is that we take these last two numbers and we multiply the first one by 256, and then we add on this number here. So let's see if we can calculate that. Let's move that up there. So I've got to calculate it first. So we take 213, multiply it by 256, and then add on 139. So it's quite a high port. Telnet 10.0.200.0.7 54667. There you go. That works perfectly. Okay, so you can see how FTP works. We create a new port, and then the client connects to it, and then we get all the details, and then we can go back to here. Okay, so passive, we get our number. We calculate it to do 8 times 256 plus 231, 58599. There you go. Okay, so that shows an example of the FTP service. Now what we'll do is we'll go back to our Ubuntu image. Went to sleep. We'll go into var log, and we'll cut our syslog, and then we can see. So in the syslog we can actually see the FTP connection. There is the rest of the commands that have been used to be able to connect to it. And next we'll go into the etc. folder, where we'll find a lot of our configuration files, and we'll have a look at the inetd.config. And it's in here that we actually start up all of our internet services and actually define what config files are read and so on. Okay, so there's the FTP service being started there. There'll be a telnet one, and so on. And so the last service that we'll have a look at is actually the remote desktop service. Okay, so I've pre-prepared this one. So this should download the Vnc Viewer, which will allow us access to the remote desktop for Linux. Just takes a little minute to run it. Okay, so if we look back at our commands that we had. Let's see if that's running it. Okay, so we're going to connect to the Linux image, which is this one here, and then we should connect. Okay, so you can see the port that we're actually using is 5900. It's not encrypted, which is a big risk. And there we go. Okay, so this is the Windows machine here, and we're actually logging into the Linux machines through the remote desktop. Okay, so you should see that we've actually moved the window on the actual machine. If we want, let's move it down here. There we go. Okay, so this has been a brief introduction to the Ubuntu services and Linux services.